Hi everybody, I'm here like usual. Time to profit off nostalgia again. The V.Smile, that time we truly attempted to make a console focused on younger entertainment and education. I mean, you had the Leapfrog, which first off, bookmarking that for a later video, but second, that was handheld. This was a whole step, a whole leap. You were making a home console with the intention of competing in the 6th generation of consoles, but unlike GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, V.Smile was actually gonna prioritize a slightly younger audience of consumers, a different area entirely. It was gonna aim directly for a few years younger, with almost all of it correlating with the gimmick of being educational, and then along with that, the majority of games would be based on popular animated films and television. It was a cheaper alternative with a different intention, and I would say it worked out. I mean, I had one, and seeing that there was a whole mountain of these games and consoles that came from here, it threw me off to say the least, finding out that this wasn't just like a one trick, but even an attempt to make multiple generations of this, a PC version, handheld versions. That's what interested me. The console itself is fine. It's very colorful. It has a bunch of buttons. I like the joystick. You know, it doesn't need to be that complicated. It is a very simple and fun device. And the first game that comes to mind is the one bundled with the release of the thing, Alphabet Park, which to my knowledge is the only game not licensed or based off of something else. Probably the best example of the expectations found within most of these games. You are a little player critter walking through the environment, at least kind of connected to one of the main locations in a given franchise. Sometimes it would be top-down, sometimes it would be point and click, but the main formula would be simple platforming with small obstacles and education checks, usually thematically appropriate minigames for spelling, hitting certain colors, spotting shapes, math. It's got a system and it sticks to it. The general vibe of each of these games was something I was a fan of. There's something captivating and comforting in a lot of these games. Usage of colors, the slightly crunched music and sound effects, but like just enough to where it was still pleasant to listen to. For me, this is the digital equivalent of getting a whiff of nostalgic air. Alphabet Park is totally one of the earlier examples of this occurring, being more primitive with some of its looks, enough to where the second generation of V.Smile would get bundled with a remade version of the game that removes like 40% of the appeal of the little potato head main characters. I had several more main games that I found myself hooked on to decently often, the first one being Thomas and Friends, engines working together, and not even necessarily like a Thomas the Tank fan as a youngin'. I guess little baby Choop just saw trains and went, aw, hell yeah. This is an example of top-down gameplay found a lot in V.Smile stuff. Most of the game is you looking for letters in a word, not at all difficult, or to be honest, helpful outside of shape recognition between all the letters. I guess that could count as something. Also, this has one hell of a lot of variety. Most of the levels, you're not even Thomas, just a bunch of the other characters. A lot of vehicles as well. I only really reached the bus segment and then gave up from there on account of me being, one, a child with no mental cognitive function to remember how far I played any of these games, and two, I don't even think I used the save options, right? Or I don't remember using them. I guess that says more about me. It was just like I was not smart enough to remember and articulate what I saw. I don't know what to say. I guess I got bored. You had Lion King, Simba's Big Adventure. Big fan of this one, or at least I was. I always thought it was difficult for me to handle, namely due to that river section, and especially this one portion with falling platforms. Little old Choopo was on the edge of his seat, his propeller hat spinning from fear if Simba fell from the cliffs and joined his dear father in getting trampled. I was actually able to beat this one. Hardly ever touched the minigames after the fact. I got this vivid memory of me turning off the V.Smile because when you beat it, there's like a 3-minute dance sequence that is so mind-numbingly boring, and the only reason it wasn't worse is because the iconic Lion King cliff enthralled me and it looks really pretty, and the entire time I was just thinking about how I wanted to be there. This one just had like a lot of platforming sections. It threw me off learning that this was like actually an educational game as well. I just assumed it was a neat platforming fun time. I remember this Ratatouille one. The main part that I loved was the city environments themselves. Like you were traversing sides of buildings and the sewers, all while learning colors and pattern recognition, and I love that. What a nice time seeing the gameplay footage. I don't believe I ever got to the endpoints with Linguini and making the food, only dying on the one with like actual platforming involved. That just happened to be the level that came right before it. None of these games are all too standout. Also, I had the gripe where you'd get these little pieces of cheese because, you know, you're a rat. All these little games need a collectible of sorts. Rat eat cheese, that makes sense. I didn't really like it in this situation. I mean, Ratatouille Ratatouille is one of Pixar's finest. This is an incredible movie made with so much love and authenticity. It seems weird that Remy's getting cheese because he only has it like twice in the movie, and to be honest, I think just collecting a bunch of little snacks or ingredients like strawberries and mushrooms or seasonings, I guess, that would have been neat. That would have been more accurate to the V.Smile Ratatouille experience. I'm not even saying this is like an adult criticizing this game. I was unhappy as a child. Still though, the warm colors used throughout this, replicating much of the dim restaurant vibe that you feel and see firsthand. It is a great reason as to why the film stands as iconic as it does. Somehow the V.Smile pulled it off here, and that was cool to see. The last one I had mentally downloaded is called Finding Nemo, Nemo's Ocean Discoveries. And this one had me oddly gagged, if only for the fact like the underwater areas are just chef's kiss. They're beautiful. I couldn't tell you why. There's this one mini game including the funny fun Finding Nemo seagulls. This is beautiful. This is what I hope my soul looks like. The single still image for me, it radiates an indescribable feeling of whimsy and hope and comfort and that youth I can't get back. I can't even imagine being capable of articulating this any better. There is just a level of personal comfort that I remember from this just still image, and it's the goddamn seagulls from Finding Nemo. Whoever made this screen, I want to give them a firm handshake. I love this. When I think about the presentation here, intentional or not, across all of these games, it's just good feeling and something I love to see. For me, it made the V.Smile more special as this welcoming, warming, nostalgic environment, and other games that have done this are like Wizard 101's numerous vast locations, and honestly most GameCube games. There is just this lost aesthetic of the 2000s throughout so many of these things that doesn't seem to be replicated or celebrated anymore, and it's something I wish we sought to fix or do more often. This feels like a lost art, and I wish it could be replicated or continued to some capacity. And maybe that's an issue with advancing technology, that we can't go back and we can't create art with older mediums. You know, that is technically a style of, you know, being a little bit more retro, of intentionally making things that are weaker, sometimes making things of worse quality. They add more impact. They feel like a different era, and in a lot of cases, they're worth it. With the V.Smile, I feel like it may be accidental or possibly just working with the limited resources available, where each game has little quirks behind them done for convenience or from unfamiliarity with a given design. Barney looks horrifying on the V.Smile. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is here, and they just port over scenes from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. You know, it's 3D models. That's also normalized. There's so many pixel art retracings of certain characters in a lot of these games. Since we can't forget that these are baby games for babies, there doesn't need to be more effort unless you deliberately decide to go back and respray an entire game for no reason. On the launch of the second generation of the V.Smile, Alphabet Park got that redesign I brought up. I really thought it was something different, maybe a sequel, but no, it's the same game, uglier characters. Actually, looking at long plays of these things made me realize how short these games actually are. The majority of them can be beaten in under an hour. They were definitely designed with the intention of being replayed or having games forgotten by the kiddos who were age appropriate for them. And that makes sense. A good chunk of youth entertainment, especially modern day stuff, is made to be mildly disposable without the full effort because there doesn't need to be a lot. Reminder, this is who we're dealing with. Actual babies who like drinking dangerous chemical items. You don't need to go all out, but it's complicated because if you do, it looks cool and you get recognized for that. I don't know. I'm not really in that industry. I appeal like high school and college students who and a little bit older as background noise. But even still, around this point, you had more and more recent IPs being brought onto here. I didn't know Kung Fu Panda got a V.Smile game, but lo and behold, here we are. There's also a couple superhero games, which is something I couldn't expect, and I can't tell you why. Again, all pretty short games, all of them about an hour tops. Not really against it. Just when you see enough of these games, you start to recognize that they aren't all too different outside of the initial franchise and main colors used for identity. Speaking of identity, I really felt like the V.Smile was starting to lose itself. It knew what it was trying to do, however, it started to go in a vastly different direction from here on. Instead of being focused on single games, it looked to be more of just an educational hub, with expansions to art through the creation of what I can only describe as a Mario or Microsoft Paint equivalent. You had the introduction of instruments, which personally I would argue is something good and worth introducing. I would argue instruments are one of the hardest things to make a habit or an effort of learning, so by doing this, you are easily allowing for new skills to be established in easily influenced children who have Play-Doh brains and can be warped in any way. Lastly, there was a DDR type pad. Part of this makes me think this was for physical activity. Another part of me realistically thinks it was done if only to see if it could cash in on the trend of these at-home dance pads. Came out before any of these, but there was a bike. At what point is this a better purchase than an Xbox? This is too much. I feel like you're going too hard on this. And then around this point, I'd assume the plot started to get lost, and we didn't really know where to go from here, because then on came the 3rd gen with a mouse. Then there was the handheld editions as just a bonus, and even then it was more of the same. You started losing direction on account of every game feeling too sameish, not really innovating on the gameplay or art outside of that initial launch. Till it didn't. The V-Flash going to a full 3D console with 3D games that somehow did nothing to innovate upon any of these games. It's such an unneeded thing and actually destroys a lot of what made the V-Smile special. Educational content took far more of a backseat here instead of being reliant on the games themselves, being 3D experiences. But I hate to say it, these are just okay to bad level licensed games now. They're very boring, they're very slow, they are meant for younger audiences, and as such, they just I couldn't tell you, they're not that great. At least with the V.Smile, it knew what it was along with the scope of these projects. This all feels cheaply made while still being expensive, and that's why I'm dissatisfied with it. Plus, any series that got another game, I gotta be real, they did nothing to continue their predecessors other than be in 3D. You weren't collecting random items in a 2D environment, you were collecting that on a whole other axis. It bums me out to see, and really this won't ever be made again. It's just more logical to go to a mobile game or play that instead of a plug and play type thing. And that kind of sucks. I truly don't believe that mobile is a better option, because so many of these free games, the ones that the V.Smile might have benefited from, are now just forced to exist as pretty simplified or typical games with ads. Like, it's cool if you enjoy it as a mobile game, it's just that so many of them rely on chucking in ad space wherever possible. I'm not saying that we should go back to this when the reason the entire V.Smile family took its lead was because of advancing technology. I just wish more was done with this little niche of entertainment rather than the alternatives of YouTube Kids or something. I'm saying this because I hate it, and I feel like there's so many good options for youth edutainment and entertainment, and we're not really doing anything there. Even the opening of the V.Smile brought me a warm smile. It was a reminder of how long it's been, thinking about just how far we've come, and it makes me grateful I had this time to use and learn through a fun little console. In my eyes, it did what it sought to do, and I just wonder if anything else could have been done here with the market it had. And then that kind of seems like it was it. There was a step away from this technology. I wouldn't even call it plug and play, although I'd be lying if I didn't say these consoles both looked and felt cheaper. It made sense when you considered it's meant to be a kid's first console. Hell, I think we had one of these before moving to the big leagues of a Wii, but it was cute, and really one way or another, it celebrated this disconnected little fragment of gaming as we know it, and I really don't think enough appreciating or acknowledgement is brought to these systems. It sucks to see, and I would love to see it more in the modern day, or how we can make it successful. Something we could go back and recall and delight. I know damn well ABC Mouse isn't gonna deliver here, but hey, hopefully something can come up as an objective location for youngsters to have their own space, especially if we progress towards a more digital world. More effort needs to be made from virtually everyone to provide better environments for younger people, especially if it's gotta be a necessity. If you want to force technology like this into normalcy, then why can't we take the effort to ensure some spaces where parents know full confidence that if a kid's gonna be using devices connected to the internet, they're gonna be safe doing so. I don't know, that's just me going on. Rest in peace, V.Smile, and your like 50 other consoles that came from you. Your mass grave will be loved in mass. Thank you for the memories and the good times. I hope you fellas enjoyed this one as I went back and looked at this thing that I like. Let me know in the comments what you thought, or if there's any V.Smile games you hold fondly, along with why. Please subscribe and check out my links in the description to find more of me. And that's really all I gotta say. Again, you know, just follow for more, check out my stuff. No witty ending here, I'm just trying to have a good sound ending. Yeah, that's all. So, see you later.